Imagine, if you will, a Mayflower wasp with relatives who signed the Declaration of Independence, contrasted with an ultra-loud, ultra-opinionated former New Jersey fitness personality. These two men committed in their convictions. As a matter of fact, I think one of them was convicted. Warning, everything you see and hear will most likely offend someone. This is The Two Rebels. Two Rebels.
Harrison with you, along with Rocco Castellano, and we are
The Two Rebels. Absolutely. And we have a very, very important guest. Carrie, please tell the audience who we have here, because I literally feel like I'm a game show host. And here we have for you beautiful prizes.
door number one. So door number one, we actually have a Middle East expert. Why? Because so much goes on, and we actually don't really know, as Americans, many of us, where is the Middle East on a map? I'm not sure. There's the Near East, the Far East, the Middle East, Eurasia, Asia. Where is this place? What is it?
And Tulsa, Oklahoma could be.
And then there's Oklahoma, exactly. And then the Midwest, which is where I'm from.
But I got a lot of maps in my book, by the way, so
Okay.
people will not get lost.
You just saw Charlotte Dennett with a T, double T's.
Dennett,
She's a Middle East expert, and her Trump is America's #1 security risk is the theme. And I'm just going to read you this quick little paragraph here. Donald Trump, now regarded as America's #1 security risk, can no longer escape probes by U.S. counterintelligence officers because of his foreign entanglements. Author Charlotte Dennett knows from personal experience the value of counterintelligence. Her new book, The Crash of Flight 3804, A Lost Spy, A Daughter's Quest, and the Deadly Politics of the Great Game for Oil, is about her late father, Daniel Dennett, who was America's top counterintelligence chief in the Middle East at the time of his mysterious death by plane crash following a top secret mission to Saudi Arabia. And that kind of says it all in a nutshell. Welcome to The Two Rebels, Charlotte Dennett.
No, great to see you.
Okay, so one question.
Rocco is going to definitely jump in on this one.
All right.
Well, so was Trump the cause of the crash, or no?
No.
Okay. No. I just had to clear that one up really quick. Quick for the audience.
No, the crash happened a long time ago, okay?
Right.
It happened way back in 1947, as a matter of fact.
Wow.
I was just an infant, but what I did is I wanted to know, he was a major, master spy. He was the only master spy in the Middle East. And I, as a young journalist, I wanted to know more about him. I'd been a journalist in the Middle East. I felt like I was following his footsteps. And so I started to investigate the accident. And that's when I found out his last mission was to Saudi Arabia, and it had to do with oil and pipelines. And then what I did is I developed what I call pipeline consciousness, because, well, we don't have time to go into all the details, but this Saudi pipeline was a really big deal, and there was huge foreign intrigue about it. The U.S. was just becoming a major power in the Middle East and in the world because of these incredibly rich Saudi oil reserves. So all the other, our former allies were very jealous. Everybody after World War II was competing for oil. They compete for oil because oil is the fuel of the military. If you want to be a big power, you got to have control of oil. Once I learned what my father was up to, then I started applying the lessons to the modern era. And so I first started tracking it in after the war in Afghanistan. There's a pipeline connection to that. The war in Iraq, same thing. Syria, the war in Syria, it's all about oil. And
Venezuela.
What?
And Venezuela.
Oh yeah, Venezuela, for sure, yeah. So in terms of finding the counterintelligence angle is simply that if you are it's the highest level of intelligence. What you're doing is you're spying on the other spy agencies, okay? So my father would be spying on MI5, British, and KGB, and so on. Then you take it right up to the present. So if Bush sorry, slip of the tongue. If Trump owes somebody money, which he does, to the tune of some $400 million, according to tax returns that we're finally seeing, who's he owe it to? They're obviously very concerned because that can compromise him. I mean, my guess is, everyone's guessing it's the Russians, right? Maybe Deutsche Bank. I mean, people are just surmising this. But
well,
Russia
most of
is
it's a Deutsche Bank from what the loans that we have seen, right? That I used to work for Trump, so I kind of know,
Oh, that's good.
with the Miss Universe pageant.
Oh,
It's very
in Moscow. Did you go to Moscow or not?
No.
Oh, not that one?
I want to go to Moscow on a bet. In all honesty, like to certain places, I won't go. One is Mexico, the whole country of Mexico. I hate that place, and only because it's very, very dangerous. I know people that have been hurt very, very badly there. Russia, not so much. One, I think it looks like a desolate piece of shit country, so I'm not gonna go, but and there's other countries too. I mean, I don't feel like I need to go to Pakistan and get, polio or whatever, but like there's certain places that I decided it was a good idea not to go to. But
so let's talk a little bit about, I think what's really interesting here, both Rocco and Charlotte Dennett, is we're talking about emoluments, really going back to the founding daddies, having examined what happens if our head of state ends up in debt to foreign powers. That's why we have this thing called the emoluments clause, which has become only in recent months familiar to most Americans. They'd never even heard of this before. And by the way, the emoluments clause is not just the president, it's the vice president and secretary of state. And the whole idea is they're not allowed to get gifts and prizes and new cars and yachts. And
you're not supposed to benefit financially from the office.
Exactly.
Hillary Clinton? Oh, wait a second. Hillary Clinton? Hillary Clinton? What?
Yes.
Bill Clinton?
Yes.
No. Nobody. You know what? You're on something here, Carrie, that I did want to say is that I think that she has a really good point in where we loan a lot of money, like the world banks loan a lot of money to these third world countries a lot of times, right? And then just so that they could control the shit out of them. And then they go, guess what? You can do this at the UN and we'll forgive that debt. And I think that's kind of where you're going here.
That's definitely, I mean, just take personal relations, somebody owns you a lot of money, right? You sort of feel indebted to that person. But I
just slap them, to tell you the truth. I just slap them. When they owe me a lot of money.
I hope it better not be mafia types. Anyway, listen, I'm joking. But really, like Russia is the big, that's the one they're all looking at because Trump has been so easygoing on Putin. Okay, so everyone thinks that, but they still haven't got the absolute proof. But it really plays out in foreign policy, and certainly in my subject, which I call the great game for oil, because Russia is numero uno player of the great game. Putin is very savvy at it. And one of the things that he pulled off is that he saved Syria. The US and Israel were not happy about that. They had hoped to overthrow Assad, and they didn't succeed. And eventually the Russians got involved, and they were able to beat all the opposition forces, which were funded by the Saudis and the UAE. And so there's a standoff going on in there, which is very, very dangerous right now. The U.S. is literally occupying eastern Syria, has claimed it for its own. And so I don't know how Trump's involvement with Putin necessarily can be an example of him being compromised, shall we say. It may be in other areas. Yeah, I can't say for sure. I just know that when you're dealing with counterintelligence, you always have to know what the other countries are coming at you with. And so there, a major intelligence guy just came out and he said, we're very worried about Trump. I mean, where is our national security if he's compromised? We all know, I'm sure you know about the golden shower, which I don't know if that's ever been proved, but it's probably the Russians. There are a lot of mafiosos. Trump, I hate to say this, but you work for the guy, but he's in tight. He's in tight with mafia guys.
No. I used to be in tight with mafia guys too.
Oh, you did?
And yes, my last name's Castellano.
Oh.
So you didn't do your research, obviously, when you came on the show. But no, and no one. I mean, if you do real estate development in New York,
you have
and
to.
you're not in tight with the concrete union, and you're not paying no-show jobs, and you're not doing. I don't care who you are. If you're not doing that, you're a dead man. You're a literal dead man. So there's
and
there's
by the way,
going to be.
I think you know, there's a Ukrainian mafioso too. Did you encounter them in New York?
No, there's more Russian.
Like Giuliani.
Russian.
Giuliani got close to the Ukrainians. So anyway, yeah, but there's that. And I mean, sometimes it comes out in the news, right? That there are these big mafia connections, and that a lot of mafioso type oligarch money is being channeled through the Deutsche Bank. So we'll see whether we get the Deutsche Bank records. But the whole point is that you're not supposed to have a leader of the free world being so compromised because of his business relationships, which just goes to show that probably not a real good idea to have a president who is a businessman or, you know, in real estate to be president. It's very complicated.
Well, and interesting, if you pull the camera back and we look at Germany, for instance, the whole point of American troops there originally was because we had the former Nazi empire, the 1,000-year Reich, was brought to its knees, and so we had to maintain a serious footprint in the nation of Germany. Then it became to deflect, during the Cold War, the Russians from impeding Western Europe. We had that Berlin Wall famously, the split of Germany, and now our president is pulling the troops out of Germany just as Angela Merkel is renegotiating oil leases and the rest with Russia, as Hungary and Poland have been taken over by crazy right-wing fascists, and the whole Soviet empire is self-rebuilding right in front of our eyes as we withdraw and shrink NATO. And when I say we, it's the president of the United States. Our president is the guy doing that.
Yeah, that's very serious stuff.
You don't. Okay, so you know, and I like to look at two sides and then say shut up to everyone. But what sometimes happens, right, is that we are focusing, or we're not focusing. Either way, we're not focusing on Russia, right, and China, who has been a huge problem, right? Because if you go, we got out of NAFTA, and we're getting out of Mexico, and to fill that, you know, and there's so much drug money, cartel money in every bank. Okay, so Wells Fargo, Bank of America, if the drug cartels collapse tomorrow, every bank would be done, right? So, and I mean, it's a reality.
Lot of drug money. That's right.
No, it's a reality. And in Mexico, right now, they have the largest lithium mines in the world,
Yeah.
right there in Mexico.
Where did you say? Where did you say?
Oh, that in Mexico,
Lithium.
they have
Yeah,
the
yeah.
largest lithium mines right in this small town. And the Chinese, all of a sudden, are there.
Yeah,
Right,
because
right on our border, literally on our border now, digging up that lithium. And
well,
now
they
there's
need
a war between lithium because we're all going to the Green New Deal
well,
type
yeah.
shit, right?
The
And
lithium,
now
the lithium's,
lithium is the new oil. You know,
yes, it
lithium
is.
is the new oil.
Yeah.
And so now we're having a fight. So I enjoy the whole Russia thing, but I'm still under the auspices or the thought process here that China is in that million or the 1,000-year, whatever plan, that 1,000-year war. And Russia is still just a little piece of shit country that thinks it wants to be a big dog.
Well,
So,
Russia,
help me here.
Russia's got a lot of oil and gas. That's what is in Russia's favor, and it is a major supplier of natural gas to Europe. And this is an interesting little wrinkle here. You know the guy, the protester who got poisoned? What was his name? Avarni or something like that?
Yeah, he
survived.
was an opposition guy.
Yeah, he's an opposition guy. All right. So he survived. Meanwhile, the United States wants to sanction Russia because it poisoned him. And the way they want to sanction it is to stop the Nord Stream gas pipeline from going from Russia and supplying natural gas under the Baltic Sea to Germany. And you see, the Americans want to sell their natural gas to Europe. They're competing with the Russians. And so anyway, they're trying to sanction, they're trying to prevent this from happening, but Germany
is that capitalism at its best? I mean, you know, competition, let's get rid of the competition and let's a monopoly.
Yeah, sure. I call it the great game, but it is. That's exactly it. Competition. That's exactly
Well, it's a chess game in all of it, I would have to believe. I mean, on the world stage, it's a really, really ugly thing. And, I think that China is still one of the worst actors in this whole game. But if you can sell me on Russia being this big bad bear, I would like to hear it.
Well, I to defend, and I've just met you today, Dennett.
And you're defending. Yeah,
I'm defending the topic that we're talking about. She's not advocating for or against Russia. She's actually talking about our head of state, the president. And she points out, since Trump loves to brag and showboat and is desperate to relieve his financial burden, would we be able to know if he sells our nuclear codes and top secrets to the highest bidder? So really, it's about a head of state, a emoluments clause, a compromat is the term they use when it's a high-level official. Are they compromised? And signs are indicating that our head of state, Donald John Trump, if it smells like a fish, maybe it's a duck. So these are questions that she's asking. Having had a father in the CIA or the precursor to the CIA who died during the mission in counterintelligence, she comes uniquely equipped, I think, to be able to at least ask the questions. And they're not icky questions to ask. They're reasonable questions to ask, as we would ask them of Obama or of George W. Bush, or if there was such a thing with Abe Lincoln.
I wish they would have asked George Bush and Dick Cheney and those guys more questions, because they were real criminals. I mean, I think that Trump is more of an ignoramus more than, even though he's a really good, smart businessman, I think that he's an ignoramus when it comes to being a president sometimes. But Bush and Cheney are real criminal, like they're criminals. And I would love to call those assholes out.
Well, I wrote a book, the book before this one, I call it the people versus Bush.
Oh,
One
really?
one lawyer's campaign to bring the president to justice. That was me. I ran for attorney general in Vermont, and I pledged to prosecute Bush for sending our troops off into that illegal war. And I was going to do it in Vermont, and I was going to hire Vincent Bugliosi as my special prosecutor,
Oh, yeah.
the famous criminal lawyer.
Yep.
And
OJ.
yeah, so he came in and helped me my campaign. It was quixotic. I mean, it didn't get off the ground till September before the November elections, but Vermont was very anti-Bush, so we made a lot of inroads. But the point is, yeah, I mean, what they did to get us into the wars in Afghanistan and Afghanistan, it was not the good war. There was an oil component to that one too. Everyone calls it the good war because they were going
and
after
drugs. There's a lot of heroin.
That was
Yeah.
Afterglow. But I remember at the time, back in about 2002 and 3, we were asking questions like, well, what's in Afghanistan? Most people had no idea where it was. Most people
Yeah.
still probably don't know.
Coffee.
And what's actually there? Like, why Afghanistan? Well, it
Yeah.
turns out the mineral rights, the potential for extraction is out of incredible volumes of tens of billions, if not $1 trillion worth aggregate of oil, diamonds, minerals.
I don't know about the oil. The minerals, yes. But there's another thing about Afghanistan. I'll show you a map. I got 12 maps in my book. Just a minute.
It was the pipeline
The
across
pipeline.
Afghanistan was the plot of the play.
Here. Now look here. All right, you can't see it easily. You see this?
Oh, we see that.
You
dotted
see this
line.
thing?
Yeah.
It goes from Turkmenistan through Afghanistan, then Pakistan and India. It's called TAPI, right? And the idea is it's supposed to transport oil and natural gas from the Caspian Sea region down to India. Caspian Sea is the new great hot place. Well, it was in the 90s and the early 2000s. It was the next place to look for oil and gas other than the Middle East. So there was an American oil company that got in there, and it plotted this route for its pipeline, but they needed to protect it. And that's where the military comes in. You can't build a pipeline unless it's protected, because otherwise the banks won't finance it, the building of it, okay? So originally the idea was the Taliban were going to protect the pipeline. But then after 9/11, the Taliban had harbored Osama bin Laden in Afghanistan. When I say the Taliban were going to protect it, Bush and company invited the Taliban into Texas to talk about pipelines. And so they were all buddy. They were buddy.
No,
And then
Yeah.
after 9/11, the U.S. said, look, we can't continue unless you turn over Osama bin Laden. And the Taliban said, well, we're not going to turn him over unless you can prove he did it. The United States never proved it, or didn't to them. So the United States says, okay, well, I guess what we'll do is we'll invade Afghanistan to fight the Taliban. That's what they did. They routed them very quickly. And then eventually they built military outposts along the pipeline route. And I've got like 5 to protect the pipeline. And
Yeah.
I found a statement by a U.S. Assistant Secretary of State, Boucher, his name was, and he admitted that part of the reason for the war in Afghanistan was, and I quote, so the energy can flow south. Okay, it's about getting that energy out of the Caspian Sea because it's landlocked. So these poor troops are going in there thinking that they are avenging 9/11, and there's a much more sinister reason.
There's hundreds of thousands of people, and I know some of these guys that once the towers came down, they were in line at the recruiting office to become Marines, Army, Army guys, Air Force. They couldn't wait to go to avenge the 3,000 deaths in New York, and I was at Ground Zero, and I saw that shit. I was knee deep in it, and I will never forget that stuff. But there were people sent over, and you know, I was hoping that I could argue with you a little bit on this, but I'm gonna let myself be taken to task on this, because I really feel that this needs more to get out, because we went, our kids and our servicemen went over there for an absolute dishonest reason. We don't need to fight the Taliban. Let them make their heroin. I don't give a shit, right? As long as we can kind of fight it on this side. But when they're going over there to defend a pipeline, right? Because we make enough oil and gas here for ourselves. You know, some people can argue fracking's not good, whatever, and we can have that argument domestically. But I don't want to be sending our guys all over there to protect.
You know, of course, there's a huge oil connection to the war in Iraq. And
that's easy. That's an easy one.
But there's a part I bet you don't know.
Oh,
I bet you don't know. All right. Now, here's another map.
Okay.
Now, you see where that is a pipeline that seems to be forking. You see that fork in the up there. Okay.
Yeah, right there. Yeah.
All right. One of those, the southern fork, goes to Haifa, Palestine,
in Israel.
and now Israel. Okay. Now keep your eyes on that. That was built in the 1930s. The oil of Iraq was the great prize of World War I, because the British had converted their navy from coal to oil as its fuel. The oil of Iraq was the great prize. They eventually built the pipeline, and that supplied the British Navy. Okay, it was closed in 1948 after Israel became a state, because Iraq was an enemy of Israel. In 2003, right after the invasion of Iraq, Netanyahu, who was then finance minister, said, we're going to have the oil flow from Iraq back to Haifa again. And it's not a pipe dream. In fact, though, it was a pipe dream. It never happened. Why? Because there's so much conflict in the region. But the whole plan was they're going to go over there. The U.S. is going to send in its troops. They're going to overthrow Saddam Hussein. They're going to replace him with an Iraqi exile called Ahmed Shalabi. He was pro-Israel, and he favored the pipeline. All right, there was just one problem. He's the guy that created the fiction of weapons of mass destruction, so he lost all credibility, and that little plan went down the drain.
A tangled web we weave when we're trying to deceive here.
I'm just going to reintroduce you, Charlotte, just for people who come and go. As Dorothy said in The Wizard of Oz, my people come and go so quickly here. We're talking right now to Charlotte Dennett. Her book is called, very clearly, even though we haven't really talked about what went on as the major theme of the book, The Crash of Flight 3804, A Lost Spy, A Daughter's Quest, and the Deadly Politics of the Great
Game for Oil.
Thank you, Game for
Great
Oil.
Great game for oil.
So, this is just a quick bio of Charlotte. Gifted in 5 languages, English, French, Italian, Spanish, and Arabic. Charlotte Dennett, former East reporter, investigative journalist, and attorney. Born in Beirut of the now famous father, Daniel Dennett, pardon me for that one. Began her journalism career in Beirut, Lebanon, as a roving correspondent for the Middle East Sketch, an English language feature magazine modeled after Time and Newsweek. In 1974, traveled through the Middle East for the Sketch, focusing on newly emerging Gulf countries and writing special issues on Bahrain, Kuwait, Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Oman, and Iran. In 1975, became a reporter for the Beirut Daily Star, Beirut's daily English language newspaper, where she wrote features about Lebanon, Syria, and Iraq. So your CV
Whew,
says it
that
all.
was a mouthful.
Let's jump into the title of your book, which is really all about your father going back in time, precursor to the CIA, big deal in that, and then his mysterious death. So
Yeah.
what are you finding now, this many years later?
Well, it took me a long time. I started investigating it 4 decades ago as a young journalist, and the reason was that I was sort of a refugee of the Lebanese civil war that was raging at the time. I came back to the States to sit it out for a while. I'd been shot at and other stuff, so I came home for a while.
As one often is.
Right.
Well, one would just as soon not be, okay?
I'm not being purposely glib, or maybe I am, but I mean, it's just, you know, because it happened to you and it happened so many times, you could just sort of throw it out over a coffee. But
Right.
you know, it is kind of a big deal.
So anyway, I was visiting my brother at his home in Massachusetts and was telling him about all my travels, and it began to occur to me that I might be following in my father's footsteps. And then I recalled that there was a steamer trunk in the attic. And I had seen it as a kid, but I hadn't gone into it. And I knew it was from the Middle East because my grandmother's, all her costumes were draped over it, and she was a missionary in Turkey. So anyway, this time I went up, opened it, and I found 4 scrapbooks full of letters and photographs. So I went to the letters right before his death, and I found his last report as an intelligence agent, and I found his last letter home. And that's when I learned that his last mission was to determine the route of the Trans-Arabian pipeline that was going to carry this
Say that
incredibly
again,
valuable.
Charlotte. The internet popped out there for a second. His last mission was
to determine the route of the Trans-Arabian pipeline. That's the same. It's another pipeline that's also in this same map that I showed you. It's the one. It's this one that goes up like this. Okay, and the question was, where was it going to terminate? Was it going to terminate in Lebanon, or was it going to terminate in Palestine, on the Eastern Mediterranean? So that's when I learned how important the so-called Eastern Mediterranean was. You really learn the Middle East through these maps. I had one reviewer say, she was sort of blown away by the map. She says, you can't unread the maps.
Right.
Once you see them, your whole vision of what's going on there changes. And so, and I wrote this for vets. I wrote this for diplomats, agents, whoever, just to understand what a mess it is over there. But anyway, that got me on to what I call pipeline politics. I began to, reading his last report, I knew that that the British were very, very unhappy about this pipeline, and I knew that the French were as well. That's when I learned about counterintelligence. They're all competing against each other after World War II for the oil, and that got me started. And then after the 9/11, you have your major endless wars beginning. One thing that I learned was that the plotting to get the oil of Iraq preceded 9/11. Went way back to the 1997. This was Cheney.
You're talking about
a bunch of
PNAC?
people. Yeah, that's right.
The
We're
project
plotting
for the new American century.
exactly.
Woo!
You
Paul
got that one.
Wolfowitz. Yes.
Yeah, Wolfowitz, Fife,
So do you believe-
Cheney. They all get into Bush's cabinet once he becomes president, and then they execute the plan. And there was the very famous statement by the former commander of NATO forces that said, right after the invasion of Iraq, he was shown a memo from a Pentagon guy who said, we're going to destroy 7 countries in 5 years. And what were these countries? They were Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, Yemen. I mean, they're all there. All the countries that have been hit, they had planned way back in 2003 because they wanted to reshape the Middle East and they wanted to control all the oil for the U.S. as much as possible. And
So,
the analysts, the lives lost. I mean, it's just, you know, millions. I mean, the people over there have suffered terribly. And that's the thing. This has all been kept away from the Americans. Don't know this. It's been censored. How often do you watch news on the Middle East or you hear about the oil connection? You ever hear it? No. It's highly censored.
well, and so do they? Because I don't really go to the Middle East ever because I don't care to. I don't like going to shitholes, and so
No,
I don't.
bad word.
No. I'm well, from the people that come back from those places that have seen the devastation, right?
Yeah.
I'm not saying that as a derogatory. I mean, it sounds derogatory coming from my mouth, but when
As it is.
well, no,
That's
I
a
mean,
bad
coming
word.
from other people's mouths, they're like, this place has nothing. There is nothing. And now it was a beautiful place. And now it's a shithole. And so that is.
If you put it in that term, in terms of being totally destroyed and flattened.
No, yeah, well, I mean, it has become, and that's what I'm saying. I'm not trying to backtrack or whatever. Right now, as it stands, they have become decimated and destroyed for literally no reason. You know, like there's no American reason why we should be there. And I'm right on it. And the question I have for you is, in the Middle East, do they talk about this?
Oh yeah.
They
all, oh, absolutely. They all know what it's about over there. I have a whole section in my book on Afghanistan, and the Afghanis, they know what it's about. They know it's about energy.
Media talk about it over there, like, because here, all the media wants to talk about is like, you know, Trump or Melania's dress that was maybe, you know, the wrong color or whatever. They don't really want to talk about real stuff. And I'm not getting off track because I think that this needs more to be talked about, because so the question is, do the people in the Middle East, like Al Jazeera and all those, you know, even like RTTV and stuff like that, are they talking about this at all? Because the American media won't. They refuse to talk about it.
Well, they live it. You see, they live it. They've seen the destruction. I mean, let's talk about Iran, all right? I mean, you know, Iran is portrayed as you know, the great enemy of the American people, the terrorists and so on. But they have a long history, much more ancient civilization with fantastic monuments of the Persian Empire and so on. They're highly cultured. In the city, they're very, very educated. In the rural areas, less so, and that's where the mullahs, the religious folks, have more of an influence. But you know, they knew that their prime minister was overthrown by the CIA, right? And he was elected democratically, and he was overthrown by the CIA. They have never forgotten that. And then you fast forward to 1979 and the hostage crisis. It would take me a while to explain that, but I went over there.
CIA, you're saying that the CIA kind of dethroned or commissioned the Shah, right?
Regime, no,
this is
right.
before the Shah.
The CIA.
This is in the 50s.
CIA, yeah, the 50s, the CIA overthrew the elected leader, right? Who was nationalizing the oil, by the way. They didn't want that. They wanted oil for profit. And by the way, the first CIA coup that was ever done, that was in Syria. No one knows this. The first CIA coup was against Syria because their president didn't want the pipeline running through Syria, the Saudi pipeline. But anyway, moving forward, and then in Iran in '79, the Shah was hated. He was backed by the U.S. He put all of Iran's petrodollars in Chase Manhattan Bank, and I got very involved in that issue. I was over there twice. It was a real eye opener to me, because when I walked up to some students and they heard I was American, they pleaded with me to tell the American people the truth about the Shah. He was brutal. He had his secret police stationed on all the different street corners. I saw them. They were killing students, having explosions in chemistry labs. They were feeding them opiates. Princess Ashraf, the Shah's sister, is allegedly involved in that. And so when he was overthrown, they were overjoyed. Then what happened is something that an Ayatollah mullah actually came in and ended up taking power. And one of the things he started to do, he started to withdraw the money from Chase Manhattan Bank. Okay, stop and hold it right there. I started talking to the hostage families. These were the relatives of the hostages, the 40, I forget how many were seized for 440 days. I talked to them, and one of them said she got a letter from her hostage husband saying, "Watch out for Rockefeller, Kissinger, and Helms." Well, these guys were the main backers of the Shah. So this is what came down, if you can follow me. I don't want to get it too complicated.
Now, we're big Bilderberg guys, so we understand.
Okay, you get that. All right. All right.
We know all those guys.
You know all that. So this is what happened. The State Department in Tehran told Washington, don't let the Shah into the United States. If you do, for medical treatment, he's hated. And if you do that, if you protect him, there are gonna be riots, and they may seize the embassy. And what happened? They let him in.
What happened?
They let the Shah in, and the embassy was seized. And then what happened after the embassy was seized? Then President Carter had an excuse to freeze the money in Chase Manhattan Bank that was being withdrawn. You get it? So this hostage family was saying they thought the whole thing was a setup. And by the way, there was something like $8 million that was seized at that time. Well, you hear Trump and other people saying, "Oh, this Iran nuclear deal. Oh, we threw all this money at them. Millions of dollars." That was Iranian money. That was part of the deal, that they could get some of their money back.
That's what Obama said. But whenever somebody does something without a proper explanation, because you know what, it may be their money, right? We were holding on to it for a really long time, but nobody was ever given the truth about what actually happened. Like, you're literally the only person, and I think that we're the only people, we're the only show that would actually have somebody on that would explain it in that fashion. Because in all honesty, if Iran is the largest sponsor of state-sponsored terrorism, right? I specifically do not want to give them, I don't care if it's their money or if it's somebody else's money, they can use it to kill me and my friends and you and like Harrison. I don't want to give it to them. But if it is explained in a way that, and we understand the complicated sides, the American people aren't as dumb as most people, as many of the Democrats and liberals think we are, right? And the funny thing about the two rebels is that Carrie is an independent that leans left. I'm an independent that leans right, but
Makes an interesting show, doesn't it?
well, no, but we're consistently challenging ourselves
That's
to
great.
understand the truth. We
That's
don't
great.
give a shit who's right or who's wrong.
Yeah, what's the title of your show? The Truth something or other. What is it? Truth.
Oh, nice. All the research that you guys do thrown out
I didn't
the
have
window.
time.
Your show's what? The two assholes? What? No. It's the two,
No, I like the title. It was Truth
it's the two
Detectors.
rebels. It's the
Oh,
two
okay.
rebels. We are rebels. I'm from New Jersey. It carries from the Midwest, but lives in California. And we both hate where we were. You know, I used to live in New Jersey. I don't live there anymore because I'm the smart one of the duo. I got out. I don't know if I'm the smartest, but I got out, and Carrie's still stuck in West Hollywood, and I'm trying to get him out. I'm trying. It's a really I'm trying to get my little fishbowl out there and get him, out. But so that's why, we love the truth and we hate truth decay.
That's it. Truth decay. That's it. That's what I like.
Yeah, so we like to prevent truth decay, and for years, America has been lied to in so many ways, and the American people have literally suffered at the hands of the mentally ill and the stupid. And we try very hard to get people that actually know what the hell they're talking about on the show.
And by the way, you might be interested to know that a previous book that I worked on with my husband for 18 years was about Nelson Rockefeller.
Oh,
the name of that book is
about Nelson Rockefeller.
Thy Will. Now, this is a story you don't know. The name of the book, it's another long title, Thy Will Be Done, The Conquest of the Amazon, Nelson Rockefeller and Evangelism in the Age of Oil. And what that book is, it started as an investigation into the genocide of indigenous people in the Amazon. And why was it we were asking, why were evangelical missionaries turning a blind eye? That didn't make sense. And there was even some possibility that the CIA might be involved. So anyway, we did that investigation. Then we found out who's really benefiting from missionaries pacifying indigenous people, sort of getting them to accept Jesus and then not resist the incursion of big oil companies and ranches and agribusiness onto their lands. So the missionaries were used. And one of the things we did then, and this is relevant to today, is when we saw how powerful they were becoming in Latin America, they had this name. They call themselves the Wycliffe Bible translators in America. They call themselves the Summer Institute of Linguistics in Latin America to make them sound very academic. They translate the Bible into indigenous tongues. And anyway, so, but we were seeing their growing power, and we came back to the United States. I don't know where you guys are about the evangelical movement, but we saw them becoming powerful there, and then we said they're going to become powerful in the United States. And what do we have? Who's our vice president? Who does our Trump rely on? And who is Pompeo?
Well, as a Christian myself, I'm going to tell you that, God is a pretty important, and Jesus Christ is a pretty important part of my life, so, but I am,
open-minded?
Excuse me?
Open-minded?
Oh, no, I'm absolutely open-minded because I don't like the fact that, people use things, like I'm still, and we've never done this podcast yet, but, like the Catholic Church is a disgusting entity to me. And I can't believe that people are still Catholic. that just drives me insane.
Were you raised Catholic?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, okay.
And one of my priests at St. Matthew's was abusing some of my best friends. And I asked one of my friends, why didn't you tell me? I would have killed him. I mean, literally, I would have ended his life there.
Well, let me bring it around full circle on the evangelicals. So this book, Thy Will Be Done, it's been called a methodology of conquest. Once you understand how it happened in the Amazon, you can apply it to any part of the world. So I would eventually start applying some of the lessons I learned there in the Middle East. So that brings us to all these Islamic jihadists who are fundamentalists. So the United States used them, first of all, to kick the Soviets out of Afghanistan. But the US has also used them in Syria to fight Assad. They've used them in Iraq. ISIS was used. Some people, I'll tell you, a lot of people over there, and it's in my book, they think ISIS was created by the United States to give it a pretext to come in and occupy the land because they're fighting terrorists. And now you just heard the news today? They've arrested 5 ISIS guys. And the timing of that has got me a little worried. I'm really worried about some kind of October surprise that's going to involve an attack, some horrendous attack that gives them the right to go after Iran. I mean, the neocons, from the days of the neocons, they've wanted to get into Iran, and they still haven't made it. But, you know, Trump's got 1 more month left. He wants to stay in power. How about rally around the flag with another war? Even Cohen said he wouldn't put it past him that Trump might start another war.
Trump wants the wars per se. I mean,
well, look, he keeps saying he keeps saying he wants to bring the troops home. Now, why is he doing that? For 2 reasons. One reason is that I think he knows that Americans are war weary. We don't want any more of these wars. So he's appealing to a base. Yeah. So he's appealing to a base, but there's another reason. Because by pulling them out, then he could justify building up the shale oil industry in the United States, which he did. The shale oil industry really took off, and then it started selling gas, oil and gas in Europe to compete with the Russians. I don't know how Putin felt about that, but that's what was happening. But here's the problem. Coronavirus is like killing the oil companies. Killing them, particularly
where I live right now, there's companies merging, right? I live in the old oil capital of the world, and it's just devastating the world, and no one knows who's doing it.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a huge glut of oil. Nobody's traveling, and it's particularly hurt the shale oil companies. These tended to be more independents, very big backers of Trump, and they're going out of business. A lot of them were not well managed even before coronavirus, so the coronavirus was like the death knell, laying off thousands of workers, and even the majors are hurting. Even they are. They're starting to invest actually in alternative energy. That's what they're doing. And by the way, that's what the Chinese are doing, lithium for Tesla cars, okay? Right. Chinese know where it's going. And so now some of the—
That's why they're in Mexico right now.
Yeah, and they're in Africa. Mexico. They're very big in Africa too. They're going after Yeah. So anyway.
This is actually a great place to end, and I'm sorry about that.
We went way on.
But Noelle, I want to offer my compliments to both you, Charlotte Dennett, and Rocco Castellano. I've just enjoyed watching this because it's been an unfolding school, and that I don't often get to just sit back and just suck it in. So you guys did a great job. Lots of
That's
great questions, lots of excellent answers, and you sculpted with broad strokes and narrow strokes the chess game of it all. And I think that's what everyone wants to know.
Yeah.
What's the game? You explained the game, and then you helped us understand what the pieces look like. And I'm so glad we interfaced the evangelical formula of that, because I'll tell you, if Jesus could come back and file a class action suit against all the people that ever did crappy stuff in his name and weaponized his religion to go do the icky stuff that is the new normal for all of us, I think a lot of people would be, and I think a lot of Christians would be upset if they knew they'd been took the way they
that's
have
true.
for decades.
Let me just throw in real quickly. My husband and I were on a radio show out in Southern California where they have a big base, Orange County, and we were talking about how they were used. And there was a person sitting in a I don't know what, in a window in part of the studio. She started crying. And when we left for a minute, and then we came back, and we found out she was so upset. She couldn't believe how she'd been used.
Well, I'm angry. I mean, because, I think that if Jesus, when he does come back, he's not going to be the nice guy in the New Testament. I think he's going to start slapping people. Just because. I think you're going to hear a Jesus slap, because he'll be like, "What are you doing in my name?" I'm gonna, Gary, this has been probably one of my favorite shows. I don't like to say that, because we have so many good shows. But I didn't, and I'm going to tell you, I didn't expect this show. Because I did my research and I was watching, I didn't expect this show to be this show. So I definitely compliment you on this. Carrie, thanks for sitting back and watching us have this conversation. I'm Rocco Castellano for Carrie Harrison, and we're still the Two Rebels.
The Two Rebels. The Two Rebels. That's the number 2. The2rebels.com. Don't actually spell it. The number. Got it? The2rebels.com.